All right. I shared a link to the agenda in chat. Feel free to add any discussion topics there. First of all, thanks to Matt for sharing a doc and raising a PR with some header reorgs. I've been putting some thought into how we want to organize dependencies for SAL, specifically out of tree SAL drivers. So I'm trying to just think about really what shape things are going to need to be in terms of where the library boundaries are, how we organize dependencies, so that like in Caleb's loadable modules PR, we can kind of work towards that as a goal. Building things out of tree, I mean, especially since our zipper APIs have things like dout prefix provider that pulls in all of Ceph's logging stuff, which is in the Ceph common library. I don't think it's ideal to have out of tree drivers depend on that. So I'd like to avoid it if we can, but I don't know if that's really tractable.
I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it. I mean, short of eventually writing our own versions of all of the stuff that we use in Ceph Common, which seems like a lot of work and not very useful.
So I guess that means that we're gonna have to actually like support a public Ceph Common as like a supported library for out of tree drivers.
Well, Ceph Common sounds like a scarily open door, but some sort of some sort of a type hierarchy and and some sort of a header, I would say, and some sort of lib for it. Would seem right.
Okay, so yeah, it could just mean splitting some things out of Ceph Common into something else and kind of standardizing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Outside of dout, what else would there be? I guess there's new tracing stuff that we probably want to pass through SAL calls.
I suspect there's definitely the encode and decode stuff.
JSON stuff, I guess that kind of falls in that category too.
Yeah.
What about config stuff or config related things?
Yeah, config related things. We're wrapping some of that up, but I don't think we can avoid necessarily. Well, you might not need to access any of that in well, you would have to provide your own configuration for your own style driver at that point.
I certainly wouldn't want to go nuts here, but I mean, what are the how much encode decode is currently exposed in SAL, and how permanent do we think it should be?
I mean, most of the types that are exposed in SAL are encoded and decoded.
But do they need? Does the SAL need to know they're encoded and decoded? You know what I mean? Does it need to decode or need to encode or decode anything? The fact that they can be is another thing.
I mean, probably not, but the means you're going to have all of the headers and libraries necessary for that to compile and link.
Right. Well, okay, but we could make it so that we encode and decode can be lifted out of header only. Maybe that's okay. It's not. I somehow doubt that's like the performance limiting step at the moment. I mean, that's only traditional C++ way to do it. But basically splitting out things decoupling more stuff to be such that coming up with a way or come up with other ways to staple these things together, maybe, so that we can get access to types, but not drag Ceph internals, especially Rados internals, into Cell. Seems like a good axiom to try to be going for.
I tend to agree. One thing we haven't talked about is what exactly do we mean by out of tree, and how out of tree do we mean? Right.
Well, it definitely should be something that, like Casey said, you should expect to have a Ceph tree around and be able to. I think, at least, I would have thought. Maybe we can go further.
Well, so I mean,
go crazy.
on the one extreme, there's you basically check out Ceph, stick your Sal driver into the tree, and build it. Right. On the other extreme is you install the Ceph packages and build your library and build your Sal library.
Yeah.
Or you can if we have like something separate than Ceph has just the thing that they need, they would just use it as a submodule in their project.
I mean, yeah, that's in the middle, definitely, right? The question is, where do we want to fall on this continuum of all the way on one end, they basically stick it in the tree and build it, which is what we have now, right? And then all the way on the other end is they don't need anything from Ceph that's not provided by packages. And then there's all kinds of states in the middle that we could get to. The question is, where do we want to fall on this continuum?
I mean, do we have a package called Ceph Devel?
I mean, there are development packages for the various Ceph things, but
you're right. That would be that would be a thing. I think that would be sensible for that to be a thing.
Right. Currently, we have a librados that we support as a development package.
I mean, I'm only arguing. I mean, I think these ideas in the middle are the likely good places. But I want to avoid going to a great effort to build some sort of a pure interface that ridiculously adds work and breaks a lot. But I don't. But at the same time, I would say we would like to have some this within like that paper that I remember, most of which was just bladder. But the key observation I had going back a year ago or in 2020 was there doesn't really need to be this complex circular dependency between CLS and this other stuff. We can decouple these, and we should. And we should sort of try to do something similar with Sal. We put the types in addition to the Sal types. Be careful about not just leaking stuff in there.
So, how we organize this, I think, affects how we can support drivers against like upstream stable releases, right? Ideally, third parties can. Ideally, they'd be able to build their own drivers against whatever we provide, and those drivers would hopefully work against, Quincy 17.2 whatever, and then not require a rebuild for every single point release that we do. But if we don't really have control over what dependencies we're sharing, then it's essentially going to require rebuilds, right?
Well, absolutely minimizing rebuilds between minor releases of Ceph shouldn't be our goal. At least I would propose. I would propose that shipping your driver binary only is on you.
I'm not against the idea, Casey. I mean, we effectively do that in Ganesha, but I think we're a long way from being able to support that. it requires a hard defined versioned API.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely put thought into versioning the SAL API itself, but I think it's
Yeah, that's good.
all of the dependencies of SAL, like the types and
Right.
the Ceph stuff is
I mean, effectively what we have to do is we have to bring every type that SAL uses into the SAL API and version it as one thing. So whether we have to wrap everything or I don't know. I mean, because the real problem is catching it, right? If we don't actually define all of the SAL types in the SAL API, then if we get any of them from anywhere else, then we have
We
to
could
catch
have,
every single time it
introduce. Well, I mean, I guess. Well, we could also introduce type versioning in other places, and then SAL API can refer to it. In addition to having also versioned the SAL API, you can just say type for all the tags. We have some type versioning strategy.
That's
and that's
true.
gonna be where we should go with that. But I like both of these. I mean, I like the strong version of this proposal, but I wouldn't build but I wouldn't put the cart before the horse. So I think we're successfully doing successive approximations, and we should stop when we run out of steam. But we should not be starting from the first. No one. I bet no one thinks so. I mean, we're not the position of the out of tree driver guy. Is not. We shouldn't destroy that person's life, or that company's life, but that's a commercial activity, and if it's serious, the resources will be available to support it. If not, it's not on the project. To try to design first for that. Or that's my sort of hypothetical thought on it.
okay. So effectively, users that are using out of tree drivers like Motor or something would wait to do upgrades until Motor was updated with that point release, for example.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I would figure I was going to do things if I were running the Motor program. And if I wanted to get further and make it easier on myself, I'd be sending people up to the upstream to help us do this other work.
Okay. Well, I drew a little diagram there, and I lacking like strong versioning for all of these things. I was thinking that at least kind of breaking it up and enforcing boundaries like that would at least make it clear for us if we're changing RGW base, for example, that we're going to break the SAL API. But maybe for now, just treating RGW base and RGW SAL as the same thing will be most expedient.
Yeah, seems plausible.
So Caleb, you're the one that's kind of most involved with this kind of linkage. Is this structure essentially what you're going for, or am I missing pieces?
I think that's fine. I haven't really given it a whole lot of thought.
The only thing I see there is that my impression is that RGW Common has really got a lot of stuff in it, including some of the trickiest stuff. So maybe we want to. So if there's a smaller thing than Common, that might be helpful.
Part of what we're doing though is we're splitting stuff out of Common.
I mean, I think it's. I guess it's incremental, but I mean, the splitting things. Well, if RGW Common historically, going back to 2015, it's the big giant header, right? That includes all the other things.
Right.
And it developed immediately all the problems with the giant header. So to me, I'm thinking of it meaning that. But if we rename it to be RGW external or RGW base, that would help me a bit. Or if RGW base is Casey's name for my basic type thing, that's okay, whatever we're talking about. If there's like some notion of from some notional external view that Casey, I think I heard Casey kind of going for. I like that. I think common is scary. I think if common meant if common meant that, that'd be fine. But to me, at the moment, I still remember it as the thing that I don't want to include most of the time because it's crazy.
Well, I mean, it kind of, RGW common is a header, and I agree with the issues there, but it's also one of the library targets in our CMake. And so I don't see a lot of value in breaking it up at that level unless there are different other targets that only depend on small pieces.
And maybe it
doesn't like your RGW file work is kind of converging to add front ends and stuff. So I'm not sure.
Okay, I mean, maybe you're right. I mean, also, I mean, maybe I'm just on the wrong track. I mean, if we can always construct the Ceph, sorry, the RGW devel based on this, and it's always there for the major point or for a point release, and that maybe that's exactly what we want.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it's really just the RGW cell piece that we need to expose as a library with headers.
Okay, I'm not vetting at all.
All right. I don't have a lot more to say on this. Anybody else? All right. Caleb, I think it was you that added the include what you use stuff.
That's right. So I've been playing with it a little bit. There's not a lot to report other than apart from it doesn't really work. There's not, it blows up on boost headers, and it's a known problem. It's a known problem that it has problems with complicated headers for quite some time. So I'm not holding my breath that it'll get fixed anytime soon, since it hasn't been fixed in 5 years. So that just leaves doing it by brute force, unless somebody else knows of another tool that maybe actually works.
Maybe we can try and just remove the cyclic include check and see if it works. I mean, just change their code to not check for those issues. I mean, assuming this is just a fraction of the problems that we can have, and usually we don't have those problems. We have other problems.
First, I haven't looked at the source to see. I haven't dug into the source to see just how hard it would be to.
I can give it a try. I mean, it says in which line, which file the assert is.
Yep.
Maybe just not assert. I don't know. I can have a look.
It could be that simple. You're right. I haven't looked at it, but I also don't want it to go off, onto some kind of recursive consume all memory on the box and then ultimately crash when it runs out of memory. But although my F38 box doesn't really have a lot of memory, so yeah, I'm just wondering how much, well, yeah, I don't know how much time to spend on this, and we need to get the zipper loadable plugins done. And I thought this was something I could tinker on, and while I was waiting for something to build. But I mean, I guess maybe the larger question is, how important does anybody think it is that we clean up all all the unused includes. I just figured
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, I think it would be a minor compilation speed increase, but I'm more interested in figuring out how to break up dependencies so that we just don't have everything including everything else.
Yeah, exactly what Casey said. I think that's the game.
Yep.
So I do
mean,
think that breaking things up, kind of like I drew out there, could help us identify places where we're including or kind of breaking layering.
That's
Currently, DB store is has kind of a weird cyclical dependency with the rest of RGW.
Guess we should work on that. It's. I don't think it's moving out of tree. So unless we wanted to, whatever we want. Yes.
right. Okay. I'm just yeah.
Right. Essentially,
Do we want to have like choke points? Do we want to, for example, have the op layers above sal only include sal headers?
There certainly should be rules about that. There should be things that don't get included in some different places. We should have some rules.
I mean, I have to admit, I have not been zealous about going through and removing headers
Totally.
as I've done sal work, and that's probably something I should have been doing.
I don't think necessarily, but I think going forward, I'd like us to make some rules and write them down. They don't have to be very complicated at first, but like the basic stuff, and then we can, if we find things we think definitely should be controlled, we should avoid pollution at that point and depollute.
Well,
All right.
doesn't it I mean, if we clean this up and we have a set of rules, then we know what needs to be publicly available for people who are writing out of tree sols. So I think it would be good to do for that reason.
or to tackle the DB store part specifically, I think maybe a good first step would be to formalize this RGW sal library and make it so that DB store can build only depending on that piece. But to Dan's point, the RGW op layer is kind of at the top, and so I think I don't think it's really a problem for it to have dependencies on other stuff as long as they're not specifics of like the radar
Exactly.
style.
Yeah, exactly. It can depend on all kinds of things, but it can't depend on that. And there are certain other headers that shouldn't, that shouldn't either. And certain things like these, like some of these serialized basic data types, I'd like those not to be mixed with things that are weird dependencies on just being in their RGW core, let alone Rados or whatever.
Right, but Caleb's loadable modules PR is essentially making the Rados cell like a plugin, so it shouldn't even link if we have dependencies in the wrong place.
Right, but there's a big difference between linking and including headers, right?
That is true.
And so basically we're
Right,
talking
but
about going through and doing the same work for headers as we have been doing for linking.
Basically within limits, yes. And so yeah, there should be some headers. Maybe there should be some things you shouldn't, at least especially as we get things cleaned up more. There should be some things you don't include in a sal driver. But I don't know if we know exactly which things those are. But some things probably.
Well, I'm just looking at what I did in my PR, and so looking at Casey's diagram, I mean, we've got an RGW common, and I've got a Rados cell library and a Rados plugin, and I was kind of thinking that everything that's in Rados cell would actually move to the Rados plugin. So then it's a question of slice and dice and moving things, creating this RGW cell layer that Casey has on his diagram, and figuring out what things that need to move there. And this is not even to do with the headers. This is about defining this RGW cell layer. So
And an idea, let's see, I talked about this in context of how we break things up as library targets in CMake, but there's also the directory structure of source RGW. And we have an RGW store subdirectory with a Rados and a DB store underneath. So maybe as we move Rados specifics under store Rados, it'll be easier to catch includes that are in generic code.
That's
Yep.
actually a really good point. Because when we move it, stuff's going to stop building, and that'll point out which files are including those headers.
so maybe that's the way to think about this. Okay. I have to think about this some more.
Caleb, on about your current PR for loadable plugins, it feels like we're still a ways off of being able to build and link all of that. Are there pieces that we could split out into their own PRs that we could merge in the meantime, so that you're not just carrying this and rebasing the whole thing?
I don't know. I have to look at it. I mean, a big part of this is a big part of my PR is breaking things up into different shared libraries. I don't think we really want to do that. Another big part is having it, besides breaking things up into libraries, is breaking things up into the shared libraries that would be the plugins. We're definitely not ready. I don't think we're ready to do that.
How about the bits where you're splitting files apart into above and below the line sections? That sounds like something we could separate out and merge.
That's possible. Yeah.
And that would also help start defining this line that we want in our heads, and so we're less likely to break it going forward.
Okay. Well, I can look at doing that.
Yeah, maybe have the Rados specific pieces move under store Rados as well.
Okay. All right. I'll do that. Let me unwind the stuff that I started doing today, and I'll put together a PR. Okay.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts on header cleanup? Sorry, what's that, Ellie?
Oh, no,
Rados
that was,
character
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
All right, anything else for the agenda then? All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you, folks.
Enjoy the rest of the Ceph virtual.